So now I'm going to play with some of the decorative stitches, and one of the functions that I have not played with yet. I decided on stitch number 97, so I'm going to hit the pound sign. You have the 2 dashes. I'm going to go to 97. That's a really pretty little decorative stitch. When you're sewing on a regular basis and you just keep going, it's going to sew and sew and sew and sew. Well, on this particular one, I only want one of that particular design. So I'm going to touch this function right here. It says pattern end. Oh, I must have been really close to the end of the pattern. It stopped when the design was finished. So if I was going in a long line and just keep going and going and going with this particular stitch, and I'm going to get close to the end of my fabric. Oh, I still have pattern end on. So it only did one. To take that off, I'm going to touch that again. There we go. Now when I'm looking at this, I have no idea when the end of the pattern is going to be. That's why I want to use the pattern end. The machine knows when the stitch is done. And it stops on its own. You always have to let it stop on its own. I'm going to disengage that, and it's now stopped. So I now have complete patterns instead of just partials, which is really kind of fun. Now we're going to work on the alphabets and the memory. The B325 only has 1 alphabet. The B335 has 2 alphabets. To get to the alphabet, you have an A right here. You can see on the screen which style alphabet it is. So this is just the regular block. This is the double block. I'm going to play with the regular block alphabet tonight. To turn memory on, we're going to touch this button right here. To put things into memory, you see a mem with an arrow going into it. That's how you're going to put the things into memory. So I'm going to open the memory. The 30 that's flashing here shows that there are 30 character opportunities for this memory bank. There's nothing in this memory because it's flashing on 30. I'm going to put Bernina in here. I have the alphabet on. I'm on a B, putting it into memory. Arrow over to the E, put it into memory. Arrow over to the R, put it into the memory. N, I, N. Every time I put something into memory, the numbers change. So now I'm down to 23 openings. If I want to add a decorative stitch to this, I have to put an underline because there's no way to actually just skip a space. So this will be my spacer. I'm still on the alphabet, and I'm going to go, and you can see that there are actually punctuation, and if I continue to go around, you also have numbers. But what I'm looking for is this underline. This is going to give me a space so I can add something else to it. So I need to put that into memory as well. Putting it into memory. This time I think I'm going to put a pretty little flower, which is stitch number 25. To get to stitch number 25, I'm going to hit the pound sign. We have the 2 dashes, 2, 5. That's what's on the memory area here. I need to put it into memory. So now I'm down to 21 slots left in my memory bank. To actually go back and preview to make sure everything is done properly, I'm going to touch the arrows to either side. So I'm going backwards. So that was stitch number 25, which was the last thing I put in there. There's my space. And if I go all the way to the beginning, we now have Bernina in memory. When I stitch that out, let's see how it looks. It shows you right here where it's stitching. There's your underline. I'm now on to stitch number 25. I hit the pattern end. When I got to that 25, I now have Bernina with a pretty little design on the end of it. So you can combine stitches with your alphabet without a problem. You do only have one memory bank, so you can only do it at once, one time at each time. So to clear out your memory bank, you have the clear button and the memory. And I'm going to hit the clear button really fast and then the memory. You now see it's back to 30 characters and I'm ready to start again. It's really kind of fun to just combine all kinds of things with it. And just as a little hint, these alphabets only have uppercase. However, if you want to fool your eye into thinking that there's a lowercase in there, we're going to spell out Bernina again. I have my alphabet on. I'm going to turn off that single pattern. Let's find that B. Put it into memory. When I go to the E, right here, what's going to make that letter look like it's smaller is actually to change your stitch width. So it automatically goes to the 5.5 stitch width. I'm going to make it go down to the 3 for your stitch width. That's going to shorten the letter a little bit. So I have to do all of those changes before I actually put it into memory. I've made my changes. I have my E. I'm going to put it into memory. When I go to the R, if I want that back to factory setting, I have to hit the clear button. But right now it's staying at my lower stitch width. So I'm going to hit that. I'm still at the lower stitch width. And all the way back up to the A. Keeping it at the lower stitch width. Now I'm going to stitch this out, then you can see if it fools your eye as well. You can see on the screen when it does the changes. Almost, there's the A. I'm going to put the pattern in so it will stop on its own. So there you go. It sort of looks like you have uppercase and lowercase when you really don't. So you can play with your stitch width and your stitch length on any of the designs and make them look different. But they have to be at where you want your end to be, like when I had here with the stitch width down. You have to make all of those changes in the functions before you actually put it into memory. So I'm going to show you one more time how to clear this memory out. You have your finger on the clear button, your finger on the memory button. I'm going to hit clear first and then mem. Oop, missed it that time. I didn't go fast enough. You really have to do it pretty fast. Hit the clear, then the mem, almost at the same time. So you can see I'm back to flashing 30. So I have a clear memory. Now I've turned the memory off just by hitting the button again. Most people know how to do all of the regular practical stitches on the machine. But one thing that people ask about all the time are how you do the buttonholes. You have your regular buttonhole right here, Or if you look on the stitch card with the B335, you actually have 3 more choices. I'm going to go with the regular buttonhole, so I'm going to touch 0. We're on stitch number 10. For the automatic one, you have to use your big buttonhole foot. Now, just a little trick I learned in training one time. It always works best if you start with your thread underneath the foot, which is kind of hard to do with a foot like this that doesn't have any openings. So before you actually put the foot on the machine, the opening where the needle goes, if you slide it up through the needle, pull the thread out from underneath it, and then put the foot on the machine, you now have your needle, the thread under the needle. And usually if I'm sitting in the front of the machine, it's much easier. There you go. This little lever right here does not do anything with the mechanics of the buttonhole. This is just for your own purpose to say, okay, I want the buttonhole to be this size. There's a little red dash right here. When the machine gets moving, I can say I want the buttonhole to be that long. So I would stop when it hits that particular spot. So I'm going to try this now. And just for fun, I'm going to say I want the buttonhole to be this long. What you see on the screen is the picture of the buttonhole. The part that's flashing is the part that's going to be stitching first. Now I'm going to go until I meet that red with this red right here. When I've done that, I'm going to hit your quick reverse button once. It's now going back. You see that it now says auto on the screen. So it's now going to complete the buttonhole without having to do anything else. And it'll stop on its own when the buttonhole is the size that we told it to be. And there you go. Once it's actually done its first programmed, the auto you don't see flashing anymore. That means it's now into the memory of the machine. So we're ready to start another one. We've pre-programmed our buttonholes, so we're going to do another buttonhole. Usually you have more than one on something. When I hit the go button again, you're going to follow this around, and you can see it changes when it's doing different parts of the stitching. So it's done the left bead, it's now going to the back, and it's going to come and do the satin stitch down on the right hand side coming forward. Let it finish its job. And you have a second buttonhole the same as the first. There you go. Another way you can do a buttonhole is actually to thread the stitch finger in the bobbin case. It puts a little bit more tension on the bobbin area. So this is the stitch finger. There's a tiny little hole there. And if you thread the thread through that hole, it's going to put more tension on the bobbin area. Hear that click? I love to hear that click. I'm using the thread cutter that's on the side. And let's see what the difference in the buttonhole is. It's the same one. I'm not doing anything different in sizing. I haven't done anything in the changing the buttonhole at all except threading the stitch finger. Now let's see what the difference looks. It actually gives it more of a domed look. It makes the top of it just a little bit higher, and it pulls it tighter in the bottom. So you can see the differences there. If you're going to do any kind of buttonhole, you do need some really nice stabilizer, particularly when you've threaded the stitch finger. The only time you really want to thread that stitch finger is for doing buttonholes, or sometimes when people do applique satin stitch. It makes a really pretty satin stitch. So I'm going to take that back out. You will tell a difference if you're doing a straight stitch with the stitch finger engaged.